Technology is fun. And today we'd like to welcome everyone here for talking about entitlements, planning, and zoning. And I know that you guys are interested in it because you wouldn't be here if you weren't, but it's a fascinating subject to me. This is affecting us as agents all the time. I'm really excited about being able to talk to Adan about this. So Adan Madrid is our guest today. Adan is down in Southern California. I met him about 3, 4 weeks ago on another Zoom that I was participating in as a guest, and he was talking about planning and different things that he's done in planning. So I'm very excited that we have him available today. Let's just have a little recap on what we did last time. Okay. So we kind of did a little introduction. We talked a little bit about what entitlements planning and zoning are. Give us like a 30-second overview of why everyone here should be interested in entitlements, planning, and zoning.
It's important to be mindful that there are municipalities that regulate what can and cannot be done on those properties. And whoever it is that you sell that property to is going to they're going to have to go down that path. Just, being mindful of that and having an understanding of how you may need to navigate that process or how your buyer might need to navigate that process will help you understand what it is that they need to go through and take a step closer towards putting yourself in their shoes as they're evaluating possibly leasing or buying the property that you have available.
One of the things that I really appreciate about you, Don, is we've been talking to other people, introducing each other to our friends who can benefit from our services. Earlier this week, we were on a Zoom call and you brought up something that I didn't know, or the general plan trumps the zoning. And that was a brand new concept to me. And so can you explain that real quick?
Yeah, that's well, thanks for asking. That I think it's a very important thing to understand. So for those of you that are working in California, lead agencies, which include municipalities, cities, counties, they are required to update their general plan. And the general plan includes several different elements, one of which is the land use element. The land use element is their 10-year vision for the allocation and use of property within their jurisdiction. So essentially what they're saying is that these properties over here, we want them for various reasons to be single-family residential, and here are the minimum lot sizes, development standards, etc. And on the same token, they'll say, well, these properties over here, we want these to be medium density, and they have their reasons for that. And you can go down the list and include commercial and industrial. They'll update their general plan from time to time as needed, and they're required to also up the zoning or rezone the properties that were affected by any changes in the general plan so that there's consistency. The state of California requires that, but it doesn't always happen. A lot of jurisdictions are behind in rezoning properties to be consistent with the general plan. So when we talk about the general plan trumping the zoning, this is what that might look like. You may have a property that you're evaluating, and with the resources that you have available, if you're looking at a title company webpage, they'll provide you with the property profile, and in some cases they'll give you what the zone designation is. Presuming that that zone designation is current, it's best to also go to the city's webpage or the county's webpage and take a look at their zoning map and see what that zoning designation is. But going back to the general plan trumping zoning, so let's say the zone designation is R1, the general plan designation may be R3. And if the general plan designation is R3, then an applicant, a property owner, is within their right to go to the city and request a zone change to up the zoning to be consistent with the general plan. And it's not the other way around. So they're not going to change the general plan to match the zoning. The zoning needs to be changed to match the general plan. So when we talk about the general plan trumping zoning, that's what that means. And it's important to understand that as brokers and real estate professionals in the business of identifying properties and soliciting those properties to potential retailers, looking for a value proposition. That's a big one because oftentimes that sort of information is not readily available. You have to dig for that. So it's not uncommon for a property to be sold under the premise that it's zoned X. Let's say just we'll use the same example, zoned R1, and it's sold at that value, but the general plan designation may be a higher and better use, such as R3. And if you were to acquire that property and rezone it to R3, you've very quickly have increased the value of that property.
And so, one of the things that I want to kind of focus in here, because this is another thing that I didn't know, spot zoning and changing your zoning. And the fact that even though the city is required to bring that zoning in line with the general plan, that they do charge for that. And they can still take a long time to get that process updated. Talk to us about that a little bit, okay?
Yeah, that's another great question. So a zone change is no different than any other type of entitlement. If you're familiar with entitlements, entitlements are a catch-all phrase, a term, part of the vernacular within the realm of city planning that includes all different types of approvals that are discretionary that you would typically see go before a planning commission or a hearing officer. Some of you might be familiar with a conditional use permit. Those are generally the most common types of entitlements that are to be had for a development project. There are design review approvals, special use permits, which are not too dissimilar from a conditional use permit. And then, of course, there's the variance type of application. You don't want to pursue those. They're very difficult to justify and get approved. So a zone change is no different than that. If the property owner is initiating or the developer is initiating that request, it's an application that needs to be filed with the jurisdiction. There are fees associated with that. You'll be assigned a case planner. The case planner will write a staff report, make the findings, and the findings they'll point out that the zone change is or is not consistent with the general plan. We wouldn't be requesting a zone change unless it was. And then it'll get scheduled before a hearing officer, if that's how the city operates or the county operates, or it'll be scheduled before a planning commission. And if the planning commission approves it, it automatically, and this is important, it automatically goes to city council. So bear that in mind. Not all entitlements go before the city council unless they're appealed, of course, but a zone change does automatically because they consider it to be a legislative act. So if you do go down that path, just bear in mind that it can be, in California, it could take 9 months, 12 months to get through that process.
Wow, that's crazy. And what are the fees typically that you're seeing in California? I know this varies across from county to county, maybe, or from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And certainly those of you who are out of state are going to have a little bit different process, but it should be the similar process in most states, right?
Yeah, it should be presumably. I think West Coast, East Coast probably mirror each other the most. And where you start to see the greatest degree of differing processes or lack thereof is in the center. Those states that are in between the West Coast and the East Coast, they oftentimes are a little bit more relaxed when it comes to zoning. Oftentimes you can go straight to building permit. So it's really
Yeah.
the West Coast, East Coast where you have the most arduous process for any kind of entitlement.
Well, it's
Fees.
fascinating because we're in the process of packing up our house to sell it to move to Tennessee, escaping California. When we're looking at zoning and building permits and everything out there, there are some areas in the rural areas, it's like the only building permit you have to have, and there's like no zoning. You can do whatever you want anywhere. But it's like the only permit you have to have is environmental health for your septic tank and the electrical connection at the from the pole to your main box, your panel on this, the main panel, and that's it. Everything else, it's like build it, and you don't have to have anything at all.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
Yeah.
There's a long list of things that are needed for an entitlement. We're just scratching the surface. If you were to submit an application for a development project, there is a lot that goes into it. And Chris, I know you have your agenda for this meeting, but if you like, I can kind of just bullet tie some of those items.
Can we do it in like 30 seconds? Because I do want to get back to our agenda.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So if you're a developer, you buy a corner commercial property, and you're going to go down that path of developing a property. So I'll just kind of list some of the documents and reports and drawings that will be required from the jurisdiction. Obviously, the title report, because they identify any easements and encumbrances on the property. An Alta survey, they need to know where those property boundary lines are without any uncertain terms, where the easements are located. There's typically a minimum phase one report. If the phase one report comes back clean, you stop there. If the phase one report comes back dirty, then you need a phase two report. There are geotechnical studies, and kind of soil you're dealing with, because that affects the design of the foundation. Then you have your civil drawings for on-site, off-site. There's always off-site improvements that include opening, closing, aprons or drive aprons, points of ingress and egress. You have your water quality management plan. If you're in Orange County, what's called a low impact development plan. If you're outside of Orange County, and those are basically best management practices for dealing with stormwater drainage. The days of allowing water to sheet flow off the property, those days are over. Jurisdictions now require that they be dealt with on site. Then, of course, you have your architectural drawings that you'll need to present before the approving body. If you get approved, then you got your construction drawings that you have to deal with. There's utilities, there's dry utilities, wet utilities, sewer connections, etc. So, needless to say, by the time you get to a hearing, a lot has been invested in soft costs. So it's important that the utmost level of due diligence and crossing your T's and dotting your I's and prudence is taken every step of the way. Because the last thing you want to do is go before a planning commission hearing and lose. So
Oh yeah.
just be mindful of
Well,
that. Whether you're doing it or your clients are doing it, just be mindful of what it is that they're about to embark on as you're offering a property to them.
that brings us to a really good point, and hopefully you can see my screen being shared. And that is last time, January 30th, when we did our first part one of this two-part series, you introduced your planning worksheet. And so this here is the PDF that anyone who came to the first one, you should have gotten an email that has a download, so you can download this from our website. It's like really extensive, goes through and covers so much information that Don puts together kind of his data gathering thing to go through as he's looking at something to try to figure out, what's possible, what's not possible, and how to go about working with the planning departments, right? After we went through and showed you that basic worksheet, then we went through and did and looked at an actual example of a filled in worksheet where Adan changed the names to protect the innocent and the guilty. Let's go ahead and go back and look at some of these things that we were talking about last time. I think last time then we had to stop. But what we want to do,
Yeah.
we've got like 30 minutes here. We
Okay.
don't have time to go through all 20 pages of data that you've gathered here. So let's take a look at what is it that is really important in this document that people should know about.
A lot to unpack here.
Yeah.
So, there are various different sections within this document, which is called a site investigation report. For those of you that may not have been on the call the last go around, it is this type of report that a retailer that is interested in the property will request of someone like me to complete. So I see that you have us on page. Give me a quick second here. My
Page 4. Yeah.
gardener's right outside. If you guys can hear that, but he
No, we
chose.
can't. Just keep on going.
You can't. Okay, he walked away. Sorry about that. He
It-
literally
It's
came
kind of
up to
funny.
my.
My wife, my door is open a crack so that the heating and air conditioning system doesn't
Yeah.
blow all of the hot air that goes in my office out through our attic fan, whole house fan that I have in my office. And so it's open a crack, and I'm in the middle of a Zoom, and all of a sudden she starts vacuuming in the other room, and I'm like, oh my goodness. It was on with another agent talking about our transaction. And I'm like, hey, do you hear my wife vacuuming in the background? She's like, no. So it's kind of good that these
Yeah.
laptops that they do a good job of filtering out some of that.
Yeah, it's good. Well, it's Friday. It's Friday, and we get our our
We have our
landscaping.
fantastic Friday follies. How's that sound?
Okay,
All right.
good.
So where do
So,
we want to go? Because we
um,
were kind of like here right around page 4, page 5. I think we were just getting ready to
yeah.
start page 5.
So, everything above page 5 is all of the, I guess you can call it executive summary. And at this point, we get to more of the just kind of the factual information about the property. As you can see here, we got the lot area, the different lengths of the various property lines, north, east, south, west, etc., square footage, use of adjacent properties, north, south, east, and west. So some of this information may seem elementary, but it's important because if you go down this path of taking the time to identify this information, it could get you thinking about potentially what some of the issues might be, especially when it comes to identifying the adjacent property. So in this particular case, we had a Best Burgers to the south, commercial to the east, and warehouse industrial to the west. And the proponent of this project wanted to construct a fast food retail establishment with a drive-through. And then we have a school to the north. So although the commercial uses to the southeast and west, those generally are not of a concern, sometimes schools can. So by taking the step of identifying what the uses are, it could force you to think about and be more mindful of, okay, so what potentially could be some of the issues that I may encounter here? Maybe I need to go talk to the principal of that school or their administration and let them know at an early stage what we're thinking about doing with the property and just take a pulse as to where they might stand with what it is that we're proposing. They may be ecstatic that we're going to come in and build or refurbish the property and bring in a new use, or they may have some issues and concerns with traffic or with vehicle stacking onto the street in front of their school. Or maybe they can provide some insight as to what happens early morning when parents are dropping off their kids, and that could it could influence the design of the project. Maybe we put the ingress and egress for the drive-through on the opposite side of the property so that we don't have those issues. It would be a shame to find all that out once the project's been designed and a lot of investment has been made on architectural drawings. So by filling out this, what seemingly could be basic information, it makes us more intentional about the project and how to proceed in the best manner. At the very bottom here, it just provides information on the streets that the property abuts. In this case, it was a corner lot, so it abutted two streets, Main Street and Second Street. And again, this is basic information, but it gets us thinking. It gets, the client thinking about the conditions surrounding the property. And again, we're looking beyond the property here. You'll see at the bottom that it says that Main Street, the conditions are poor. Second Street, the asphalt, on that street also was poor. So with the streets being as they are, it could lead to the city requesting that we repave the streets as a condition of approval to the project. And in some cases, that might be a legitimate condition. In other cases, it may not. And we've had conversations on other platforms about two court cases. Just write them down real quick. The Nolan and Dolan case, and those are often referred to as a nexus test. And I won't speak to those today, but just write those down. Look them up on Google. Nolan and Dolan
And
and
for
nexus
people
test.
who are on today and they didn't attend part one, we actually had more of a discussion on part one. So go back and watch the video. And for those of you who registered for this event, we are going to send out an email within the next day or two following the live recording. And we're going to have a link back to that last event too. So you can go back and watch that. Less than 30 minutes to cover all this.
There's always so much to talk about here. So this
Yeah.
this thing I want to share with you, I think is really important for you guys to also be mindful of. So if you have a property that you're trying to lease or sell, and the roads are in poor condition, it's possible that the jurisdiction already has in their budget and in their plans of infrastructure improvement to either to repave the streets or to reseal them. Usually they'll do what's called a grind and cap, a grind and recap of really, roads that are in really poor condition. And that's important for this reason, because once they improve those streets that abut your property, they will generally impose a moratorium that prevents any saw cutting, trenching across that newly paved street, to run new water laterals to connect to a water main in the street, to run utilities. There will be a moratorium. So let's say you move forward with your project and everything seemingly looks good from a zoning perspective, and we go down the path of submitting applications, and then we find out midstream that, oh my gosh, we can't trench across the street because they just recently repaved it for a year. That's going to affect everybody because the retailer is not going to be able to satisfy their conditions precedent in the lease agreement. That's going to affect you because they won't be able to close the deal. They may even walk away from the project. So when I see a property that I'm evaluating and I notice that the sidewalk panels and the drive entrances and the asphalt are in really poor condition, as part of the due diligence, I'll immediately go talk to engineering, and see if they have any plans in the near future to repave those streets. And if they do, and they know a project is being considered for that property, they will wait for the property to be redeveloped and for the work that's required in the public right-of-way to be completed before they go in and repave the street.
Wow,
So that's something that could,
that's
yeah.
really fascinating because it didn't even occur to me in the projects that I've done, we've not encountered that. And so to hear your real life examples of what's going on out there in the situations that you're dealing with, I really appreciate that. That real life, those real stories of what's happening out in the real world. And by the way, real quick, for those of you who are joining us on YouTube, we do ask you to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. And I'm kind of excited because next week is Valentine's and it's our 1 year anniversary of launching our channel. And just yesterday, we hit 800 subscribers. So kind of excited about that. And I'd like to appreciate and express my appreciation to each of you who have subscribed. And if you haven't already, please do so. I do want to show you the channel. We had 805 subscribers as of this morning, and we've got a lot of content here for those of you in the real estate industry on commercial real estate. So we do appreciate you checking out our videos, and we've got a lot of stuff on lending too, especially SBA lending, and that is a big impact on many of your projects. All right, so let's get back to our report.
Okay, more fundamental basic information. This all pertains to the zone designation for the subject property. You'll see that there's a line item there for proposed zoning. That's only applicable if the project necessitates a zone change. And if we believe, based on our research, that a zone change is feasible. if it's not feasible, we'll let the client know right away. It's just not something that we need to do. And then there's a section there for adjacent zoning. Again, it's, just as important to know what the adjacent uses are. It's important to know what the adjacent zoning is as well, because it gives us insight as to what the potential issues might be. And then a lot of times it affects the setback requirements. Setbacks between two commercial properties is one thing. It's a little more relaxed. Setbacks between a commercial property and residential property is going to be greater. So that affects how we look at the code and identify what sections are applicable.
This might be a
Um,
good point to just talk real quick about the conversation we had the other day with a potential client, and that is spot zoning.
oh,
And
yes. Okay.
because the situation that we were talking about, it had to do with a nonprofit organization wanting to build um, like apartments on their extra property that they own. And they're surrounded by residential, but a couple of lots over from where they are, they did have some multifamily. And so go ahead and talk about that for just a moment. And I was surprised too when you said that spot zoning is actually illegal in the state of California. May not be in your state if you're outside of California, but at least in California, right?
Yeah, it is in California, and presumably it would be no different like on the East Coast and in those areas, those states that have intensive zoning requirements as well. I think the premise behind the ideology, the law with regards to spot zoning would be consistent across the board. So what is spot zoning? Spot zoning would be if an example, you're in a residential tract and everything in that tract is zoned R1. But for whatever reason, you want to rezone your property to R2 and you go to the city and say, hey, I want to rezone my property to R2 and build, low density multifamily. They're going to say no, because that would essentially be spot zoning where you have one property surrounded by an abundance of other properties that have a different zoning, but you want that one little property, that one little dot, that one parcel to be zoned something different. They would never do that because that would be considered spot zoning, where you have one lot, one spot of property that's different from everything else around it. So you'll never see that on a zoning map. If you start evaluating zoning maps, you'll never see a scenario where you have a row of properties that are zoned commercial, but then the one in the middle is zoned something different. That just doesn't happen. You'll have swaths of lots, swaths of parcels that are zoned appropriately for the streets that they abut. So if you have parcels that abut a major arterial street, they're going to be commercial. In some cases, industrial, depending on where you're at. And then you'll have another swath of properties that are zoned differently, but you'll never have a parcel zoned something that differs from everything else around it. So that's what spot zoning is.
Okay, perfect. And while you were talking about spot zoning, I put my slide up for just a second so people know who I am as a commercial real estate advisor. We are now launching a residential team across the United States. So if you are a residential agent that wants to be involved in commercial real estate, we do encourage you to get in contact with us. This inner zoning thing is just fascinating. There's so much to it. How many years of education did you have to have before you kind of got a handle on this and work experience?
Many years. Well, I was a city planner in the early 90s and was very young at that point in time. Had aspirations to stay in the public sector and eventually become a planning director or city manager or something of that nature. And God had different plans for me, and I found myself on the other side of the counter in 1996, uh, very young, working for a land use consulting firm, and had been on that side of the counter ever since. So it's, I don't know, 26, 27 years being in this environment, being in civic life. So every profession, every trade has their organizations that you can get involved with. With what I do, there's the League of California Cities and other um, organizations that are attended by city staff, elected officials. I usually find myself in those circles. So I've represented hundreds of projects. I've been to hundreds of planning commission hearings, hundreds of city council hearings over the years.
Yeah,
Um,
well, I'm really happy that that we know you and that we have access to your knowledge nuggets and wisdom bombs today.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So can we go back to spot zoning for a second?
Sure.
Okay, so real quick here, in reflecting on my responses on spot zoning, I feel like I told everybody what you can't do with regards to spot zoning, what that really means and how that prevents you from rezoning a property amongst other properties. But what I didn't share with you is how you can strategically work around that to bring value to a property potentially. So let's say you have a row of properties and they're all zoned R1. And then the property right next door to you is zoned R3. And for whatever reason, the municipality decided to stop the R1 zoning and start the R3 zoning at that particular parcel. And there may be no rhyme or reason for it. Maybe it's the lot size. Maybe the lot size next door is twice as big as the one that you're looking at that's R1, and every other parcel to the other direction is smaller. Who's to say that you can't procure both of those R1 lots and do a lot line adjustment, thereby combining the two lots and rezone them to the R3 zone designation, which is just to the right or the other direction, and adjacent to those parcels. That would not be spot zoning. It's something that potentially could happen, and you could make a credible argument to rezone those lots to the adjacent zone designation. And if you do
Well,
that, you're bringing value.
yeah, and when we were talking with the organization earlier this week, you also said that even though they were an island surrounded by R1, that because R3 was like one street over, that it's possible in some circumstances, and we didn't look at their circumstance necessarily to know if it was possible, but you said it's possible actually to have that zoning map change to encompass maybe those R1s that are in the middle and also yours so that you don't end up being an island.
Yeah, that's true as well. It's not implausible, it's not impossible. You just have to go down that path and get a pulse as to how receptive the jurisdiction would be to do something like that.
Is it ready? Are we ready to move on, or do you have some more to say about that?
No, we're ready to move on. So we have additional information on this one particular page here. So you'll see a section 3.2 for land division. Our clients will want to know, and it's incumbent on us to let them know if there's any kind of land division required, if it's with any parcel map or a lot line adjustment or lot merger, something of that nature. So this is just to further complete the due diligence and provide them with full disclosure as to what's required. This next section, environmental assessment, we talked about phase ones briefly. For those of you that are not familiar with phase ones, basically there'll be a qualified environmental engineer that'll go to a property and essentially kick rocks around and do a record search to identify if there's any reason to believe that the soil may be dirty. And if they have any reason to believe that the soil is dirty, then they'll recommend and prepare a phase 2 report, which is a lot more comprehensive and invasive because they'll come out and they'll core drill at strategic locations on the property and take soil samples, test those soil samples, and see if there's any contaminants.
So
So
environmental stuff is amazing, fascinating, and it's another area that I had an opportunity to dive into in a conversation. So if you look on the YouTube channel for demystifying environmental issues in commercial real estate, I believe that's the title. And so definitely you want to check out that video. We have an entire hour with an environmental engineer consultant, and they've got some amazing stories. You're going to want to hear the story about the goats, especially.
you'll notice here that there are footnotes at the bottom of most of these pages. And the reason for that is we want to document where it is we're getting information and to substantiate what it is that we're saying. So if I'm telling a client that this project is going to require a conditional use permit, I want to convey to them that I've looked at the code sections that set forth that requirement. And more importantly, it's, and surprisingly, on the flip side, if I'm telling the client that a project does not require entitlements and we can go straight to building permit, that gets everybody's attention because it's a faster path to getting their project constructed when you don't need entitlements. So especially when making that sort of representation, we want to be able to back that up with the code section and make sure that we're not misrepresenting the fact that there are no entitlements required for a particular project, because that could really hurt everybody involved. So footnotes are important, whether you're citing a code section or citing a specific plan, or in some cases, I've referenced an email and attached the email to the report, or referenced a conversation that I may have had at the counter.
Cool. And you did make a point that I think is important in our part one of this video. And that was that the cities don't have liability if they make a mistake in telling you something. They can still go back and say, oh, sorry, my mistake, my bad. But now, even though you spent a bunch of money based on what I said, or even an email, you know, mea culpa, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So just be mindful of that. If you take this on yourself to do some preliminary due diligence, when you walk into City Hall and you ask a question and you get an answer, and that response turns out to be incorrect, the city they're indemnified 100%. You can't go back and say, well, I spoke with so-and-so and he said that I can do this. Now you're telling me I can't? That's not going to get you out of the predicament that you may find yourself in. So we had a fairly long discussion about, how to approach a city initially to get some of your questions answered. I think Chris would probably encourage you to watch the previous video from the last session that we had on this. We had some
Absolutely.
discussions about, how to go about doing some of your due diligence. So we can skip sign requirements. That whole section there is really for the benefit of the sign company and the architects. We can just keep scrolling, go down to setbacks. So a lot of this information is just objective criteria within the code.
Yeah. So
It's all
there were
setbacks.
setbacks, exterior building architecture.
Yeah, and you can scroll down a little bit more. I think we're getting toward the end here. So it's not just zoning that's going to be important to a developer looking to build a project, but it's important for them to understand the availability of gas, electricity, storm sewer, water, the availability of water. Most of these items are generally not a deal breaker for a project, with the exception of electricity. Electricity has become a really big deal, especially here in Southern California and within the city of LA. If you haven't had any projects in LA recently, just know that all new construction must be all electric. And that comes from what's called the green code. Um, and new commercial developments also must provision for and provide EV charging stations. There was a time a couple of years ago where new developments, all we had to do was plumb for it, to run the conduit underground and make it ready for those EV charging stations to be installed at a later date. Now it's required upfront. So if you're building a Target, a Target big box retail building, you're going to have to comply with all of these requirements. So it's driving the electrical load through the roof. A fast food restaurant at one point in time only needed 400 amps. Now we need 800 amps, in some cases 900 amps to power that fast food restaurant. So it's really taxing Southern California Edison. It's taxing LADWP. It's making it difficult to get power to your site. So power is a big deal. What I'm recommending now to clients, I'm recommending that they engage a utility consultant. There are companies out there that specialize in dry utilities, to also do some due diligence up front before they commit to a project because power has become such a big deal.
Yeah.
Uh,
EV thing and requiring chargers everywhere. I mean, because they have to account for potential load if everyone is charging at the same time, even though people don't.
Yeah, it's a big deal. So here's something that I would like for you guys to know, as brokers and real estate professionals. Most of your property owners that may have older commercial buildings that they're wanting to repurpose into a higher and better use, they may or may not have tenants in those buildings. And what we've seen is if they do have tenants, they'll keep those buildings up and they'll keep their tenants in place as we go through the entitlement process and the permitting process. And then they'll vacate those tenants just in time, which is great. That's ideal. But in some cases, we're dealing with a property owner that has a building that is not occupied. And in some cases, they feel that if they were to demo the building sooner than later, it facilitates the development process. Maybe they're thinking, gosh, if I can just demo this building and I have a vacant lot, it'll become more attractive to a developer. And that's not necessarily true. In fact, I would say that's not true. It would be better to leave that building alone and to leave, if there's a transformer on that property, to leave that transformer there. And that's really important because we recently had in this last year a scenario where a property owner did proactively demo their building. And in response, LADWP, they went and retrieved the electrical transformer and they cut the cable. So the next retailer shows up and there's no transformer and there's no power to the property. And by doing that, they made what could have been a 6-month electrical delivery process into a year and a half.
Wow.
Um, so
My one of my relatives is a farmer, and during the storms last year, the local utility came out and they cut the wires between the pole and the panel. And so now they're making my relative go through a complete new application process to get power delivered to the property, even though it was the utility that cut the wires from an account that had been existing for 20 years.
Mhm.
And they're making them start over from scratch.
Wow. Yeah. Power's a big deal.
Yeah,
Can I
power is a huge deal.
yeah, can I share one more thing that's
Sure.
not related to this here? And that's with regards to lease agreements. Um, I think it's beneficial to share the terms and conditions of a lease agreement, especially with regards to the divisions of responsibility with your development team. Oftentimes we'll see terms in an agreement that don't necessarily line up nicely with how things happen in the field and how things happen with permitting. I'll give you an example. A year ago, we had a lease agreement between a retailer and a property owner, and the division of responsibility was as such with regards to demolition. The property owner was responsible for demolishing the building and the concrete foundations, and the incoming retailer, the tenant, was responsible for demolishing everything else. And that doesn't coincide with how cities approve things. A city will issue a demolition permit, but that demolition permit is only good for vertical structures. They're not going to allow you to demo anything that would entail ground disturbance. So the asphalt, the concrete slabs, all of that, and the underground utilities need to be demoed along with the grading permit, which is issued for and coincides with the start of construction. And that's going to fall on the retailer's general contractor that's going to be building out the site and the building, the new building. So oftentimes we'll see lease terms that don't coincide like they should with how things happen in on our side, on the permitting side and entitlement side. So what I've encouraged the brokers that I deal with is, when you get to that juncture, you can redact all of the sensitive information, but it helps to bring somebody in to discuss how the divisions of responsibility within the lease agreement, what that's going to look like, so that you don't have all these unnecessary subsequent amendments to the lease agreement at the last hour to continue with the process.
Or you've already signed a lease and now you got to go back and redo it. That is really insightful, and I haven't run across that in projects that I've worked on. So thank you for sharing that with us. All right, we've only got like 7 minutes left. What else is really important that we go through? We got 10 pages left, and I know a lot of the pages don't have a lot of information on it, but they're great things that you want to have as you're doing your site investigation.
I think we're actually getting towards the bottom here. If Chris, if you could scroll down a little bit more. The remainder of the pages are going to include photographs of the site for this particular report. This fictitious site with fictitious city names and
Yeah.
just before the photographs, there was a list of the applicable code sections. So you have the building code, structural, electrical, plumbing. This is really to benefit the architect
Hmm.
when they get involved with the design process.
Okay.
So I think
And
we're pretty much done with the checklist here.
well, I would like to know why you included these photos. What was it about these particular photos that made them important for the site investigation report?
Good question. Well, there's that old adage that a photo tells 1,000 words. So I generally like to take photos from all corners of the property, showing the condition of the sidewalk, showing the condition of the property. I like to look for where I think utilities are coming in, both water and electrical, telephone. Just make as many observations as possible. In some cases, truthfully, you may find yourself in a rough neighborhood, so you don't want to stand there for a long period of time in deep thought about what it is you're looking at. Um, so being able to step out of your vehicle and quickly walk the property, take your photograph, take as many photographs as you possibly can, and then leave. And then in the comfort of your office, you have a plethora of photographs where you can evaluate and in the comfort and safety of your own office, not out in the field. Because quite frankly, some of these properties, they are in areas that are, I wouldn't consider safe. So photographs are important in that sense, and then you can share them with others on the team. If somebody has a question, maybe nobody recalls. Was there a transformer on this property? I don't remember if there was. Are the landscape planners still there? Do you remember if the trash enclosure is still there? I don't remember. So we can go back and take a look at the photographs, and the photographs help us to piece together some of the preliminary due diligence and the discussions that ensue around all of that as projects are being designed.
Okay, cool. And the site investigation report, this is really just kind of establishing your initial boundaries and observations. And there's a lot of work that goes in behind this. I mean, this is kind of like the tip of the iceberg, right?
It is, and it's a jumping off point. So I'll find myself on conference calls with the retailer who initiated the request for a report like this, along with the architect, the brokers on all sides, their senior management, and it's a go, no go call. And it's a serious thing because they're going to ask all the hard questions, and at that point in time, they're going to decide whether or not to proceed with this project. So it's important to have done the due diligence and not leave anything unturned. So for
So,
what I do as a consultant, it would be very detrimental to me to represent to a client that this should be a go. There's nothing to be concerned about, and they make an investment in preparing all the drawings and procuring all of the reports that they need to procure. and we find ourselves, 3 or 4 months down the road, and there's an issue that wasn't disclosed or discussed that derails the project.
Yeah.
So due diligence is very, very, very important.
In speaking with this, I know that you have worked with some national brands, right?
Oh yeah. Hmm.
And so, for those of you who are joining us today, I want to announce that next Friday, for those of you who are joining us in real time or listen to the video before February 16th, Friday the 16th, we are having a former land acquisitions person from Lennar. And you guys all know who Lennar is, the huge national home builder. And we're going to be talking about pitching, the putting together your perfect pitch to talk to the national brands to get them to consider your projects. So does that sound like that would be of interest to anyone? Would you like to know how to approach national brands and get inside
Absolutely.
and be able to talk to them about the projects that you represent? Anyhow, that's what we're doing next week. And so you're going to want to tune in for that. We will be sending emails out to everyone who's registered. And if you didn't register, just go up and watch the part 1 video. And there is a link there for registering for part 2. And then you'll get an email explaining what's going on with our future broadcast. So, Adan, every time I get on a phone call with you or talk to you with a client, there's these little knowledge nuggets that you drop that are just tremendous. And one of the things that I appreciate about you is that you share so freely of your knowledge and your experience. And from what I understand in listening to you, you don't just work in Southern California, but you'll work throughout the state of California. You work in Utah, Arizona, Nevada, kind of the Western states. And so if someone has something that they'd like to get a project in front of you, just you know let me know, and I will definitely introduce you to Adan so that you guys can have a conversation. So this has been
I appreciate that.
fantastic. I really appreciate everyone who joined us today. And it's amazing because we actually, people have come and gone, but we've been really steady with the number of participants today. So we actually have more participants now than we did at the very beginning of the call. Thank you everyone for joining us. Please go back, watch this video once we post it. Please like the video. Please comment on the video. Let us know what you liked about it. Comment and let us know what subjects you'd like us to cover in the future as we are exploring issues that are of importance to commercial agents specifically, but also to residential agents as they're looking at diving into commercial real estate. So that being said, everyone, thank you. Have an amazing weekend. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.
All right. Thanks. Thank you.